Circuses were big business in early 20th century America, and the Ringling Brothers Circus, particularly after its 1907 merger with Barnum and Bailey, was the biggest of them all. There were 7 Ringling Brothers, and 5 of them founded and ran the circus. The longest surviving of the 5 was John Ringling. Born in 1866, he had founded the circus with his brothers in 1884. Beginning as a performer, a clown and a singer, he soon moved on to managing the complex travelling arrangements of the Ringling Circus. The family business made him a great deal of money, and investments in oil, railroads, and real estate made him still more. He lost it all before he died in 1936, but that is another story. John Ringling and his wife Mabel, who died in 1929, spent a lot of their money on art, with the aim of establishing a museum and an art school in Sarasota, Florida, where they had settled. The John and Mable Ringling Museum of Art was founded in 1927 and opened in 1932. It is now part of Florida State University. The Ringlings had a close association with the German art dealer Julius Böhler. John Ringling met him in 1924 in New York, where the Böhler family firm had recently set up an office, and soon came to rely on him to manage his program of art acquisitions. Böhler was more than a favored dealer and purchasing agent. He was mentor, advisor, and curatorial consultant to the Ringlings Museum project, helping them to acquire the extraordinary collection of works of art, chiefly European paintings from the 16th century to the 20th, which made up the John Ringling bequest, and have formed the heart of the museum's collections ever since. It was in late 1928 or early 1929 that John Ringling acquired, through Böhler, this painting, which had been sold at Sotheby's in London in February 1928 by the Earl of Sheffield from his family collection. Sappho Inspired by Love, painted in 1775 by the Swiss artist Angelica Kauffmann. The ancient Greek lyric poet Sappho, who lived on the island of Lesbos in the northeastern Aegean Sea in the 7th century BC, and wrote with unparalleled beauty and power of intense human emotion, above all of love and desire between women, has long been celebrated as one of the greatest of poets. During the 18th century, Sappho was an important figure in literature and in culture more widely, particularly for women who cultivated the arts or sought to develop patronage and influence through social roles such as creating salons and other forms of female-centered sociability. Sappho was also an inspiration for women who loved women, and she remained strongly associated with same-sex love and desire between women, despite concerted efforts led by male literary figures to rewrite her as a heterosexual who disowned her feelings for her own sex and ultimately killed herself for love of a man. But even beyond Sappho's significance as the archetype of lesbianism, the fact of her existence as a creative woman with a powerful, enduring, and distinctively female voice, her status as a literary figure of the first rank, the example of her writings and her life, all were potent and influential for women seeking powerful female figures as models and sources of inspiration. For a woman such as Angelica Kauffmann, a creative artist determined to reach the highest levels of her profession, Sappho held obvious, powerful, and very personal appeal. Sappho Inspired by Love was exhibited by Angelica Kauffmann at the Royal Academy in the same year as she painted it, 1775. She has signed the work with this date. Kauffmann had come to Britain in 1766 at the age of 25, with a career of artistic success in her home country of Switzerland and in Italy behind her. It was her reputation as a portrait painter with British visitors and residents in Italy which led to her being invited to London by the wife of the British ambassador to Venice. So, by the mid-1770s, Kauffmann had been in London for nearly 10 years, and was a well-known and successful artist, highly accomplished in the fashionable neoclassical style, who did not lack for commissions, and whose work sold readily. She carefully controlled her image and the public dissemination of her art, ensuring her work was widely circulated through prints and engravings, in which she took a close interest. Her aim had always been to achieve a reputation as a history painter, a practitioner in the highest genre of art, a genre in which few women practiced. She had been one of 2 female founders of the Royal Academy in 1768. The other was the painter, Mary Moser. The Royal Academy shut its doors to women after this. No female student could train there until the late 19th century, and no other women were to be full members of the RA until Dame Laura Knight in 1936, 168 years later. Sappho Inspired by Love was one of 11 pictures Kauffmann showed in 1775. In fact, there were complaints from some of her fellow academicians that she was showing too many works, and some were not put on display until she complained to Sir Joshua Reynolds, who ensured that all her works were hung. The title of this painting in the exhibition catalogue is given simply as Sappho. Sappho seems to have been acquired by John Baker Holroyd, later Earl of Sheffield, presumably for his home at Sheffield Park in Sussex, and it remained in his family until sold in 1928. At some point during this period, the picture lost its original title and its association with Sappho. The identity of the lady depicted was forgotten, and the evidence in the painting which confirmed it was overlooked. By the time Ringling bought the picture, it had acquired the title Lady as Venus, with Cupid by her side. The Ringling Museum's catalogue in 1949 gave the title in a slightly different form as A Maiden with a Cupid, presumably because of a recognition that, beyond keeping company with Cupid, the female figure in the painting had nothing about her which particularly identified her as Venus. She was cast instead as a young woman begging for Cupid's aid in easing the pangs of unrequited love, and the line of verse she is writing was interpreted in those terms as a generic appeal, rather than being recognized for what it actually is, a line of Sappho's poetry. It was not until 1971, in an article in the Burlington magazine, that the subject of the picture was correctly identified by the curator and art historian Peter Tomaroy, and its true title restored. Kauffmann painted 2 versions of this composition, the 3/4-length version, now in the Ringling Museum, and a full-length version with expanded composition and Sappho shown in full figure. This painting is in a private collection. It is not signed or dated, but is sometimes given the incorrect date 1782, an error which apparently originates with Christie's when they sold the painting in 2000. This version of Sappho was clearly in existence before 1782, as it was used in 1778 as the basis for a widely circulated engraving, and the probability is that it was painted at the same time as its 3/4-length counterpart now at the Ringling Museum. The full-length picture was exhibited with the Free Society of Artists in London in 1783, at a time when Kauffmann had left Britain and was living in Italy. The title ascribed to it was Lady and Child in the Characters of Venus and Cupid, which is possibly where the erroneous title also applied to the Ringling version originated. The landscape setting of this painting, with its crossed tree trunks and shelves of rock, has affinities with that in Sappho Giving Anacreon a Feather from Cupid's Wing, a 1770 work by Antonio Zucchi, who would become Kauffmann's second husband in 1781. Although the full-length Sappho depicts a larger scene, it is physically smaller than the three-quarter-length version, suggesting that the two pictures were painted with a view to being displayed in very different settings. In the smaller painting, the conventional attributes of Sappho are on show, her lyre and her laurel crown, indicating her status as a great poet. These items are not visible in the Ringling's version because of its more restricted extent. In the full-length version, Cupid's right wing is tucked away behind his shoulder rather than being extended outwards, and a fold of his drapery falls across his thigh and lower abdomen to conceal an area left exposed in the Ringling painting. In the distance, behind Cupid, a volcano is erupting, an unlikely event on non-volcanic Lesbos, which is some distance to the north of the volcanically active zone of the southern Aegean. But volcanoes were highly fashionable objects at the time, symbolically associated with emotional turbulence and outbreaks of passion. Kauffmann had spent much time in Naples, and was of course very familiar with Vesuvius, which was then in a highly active phase, and was one of the celebrated sites of southern Italy. The full-length composition was popular, being disseminated not only through the engravings, which were such an important element of Kauffmann's public artistic presence, but also in decorative items, such as this pendant from around 1800, and at least one full painted copy by another artist is in existence, which is in the collection of the State Museum in Berlin. The images in these cases are reversed, with Sappho on the right rather than the left, because they are based on the engraving rather than on the original painting. The three-quarter-length Sappho Inspired by Love, bought by John and Mable Ringling for their museum in 1928, shows Sappho composing her verses while sitting on a conveniently placed raised shelf of rock in a classical rural scene, with trees and flowers to her right and a similarly sylvan setting behind her to her left. She has a wooden tablet propped on her lap, with a scroll of parchment supported on it, upon which she has been writing. Her pen can be seen in her right hand, and she gestures towards what she has written with her left. She is sitting so that her body is facing to the viewer's left, but her head is turned to her left, the viewer's right, so that she can more easily converse with Cupid, who is standing immediately behind her. This position may have been inspired by Guercino's 1651 painting of the Cumaean Sibyl, which Kauffmann would have known through reproductions, with the Sibyl's posture reversed. The faces of Sappho and Cupid are tilted close together, eyes meeting. This is Sappho as the immortal poet of love, directly inspired by Cupid himself as she writes the verses of passion and desire that make up her appeal to the goddess of love. Cupid has red drapery over his shoulder and falling down his back, but is otherwise nude. Rather cheekily, he is standing on the edge of Sappho's cloak. His quiver of arrows is lying at his feet. Sappho's clothing represents a version of ancient Greek female dress, as the 18th century understood it, and is a mixture of simplicity and restrained classical ornament. She is wearing a white tunic, or chiton, which is fastened at the waist by a girdle of embroidered cloth. The fabric on the left side of her upper body is held loosely by a jewelled gold clasp on a strip of gilded fabric, and has fallen forwards to expose her left breast. A cloak or mantle of rich blue with gold-embroidered decoration at the hem enfolds her right side and falls around her back. A jewelled golden armlet encircles the upper part of her left arm, and her hair is held by a similarly decorated band and a loosely tied ribbon of golden cloth. Many successful painters employed assistants to paint in the drapery on their figures, but Kauffmann was known to be a painter who did not do this, but painted all her canvases herself. The drapery here is loosely but effectively modelled. It both covers and reveals Sappho's body, creating about her a frisson of sexual desirability while still maintaining the elevated spiritual character appropriate to her status as a great poet, and respecting the restraint and harmonious balance essential to neoclassicism. Cupid's darker skin makes a striking counterpart to Sappho's lighter skin tones. The brightest part of the painting is Sappho's face, expressing the idea of poetic inspiration, the effect enhanced by the fact that Cupid's face, bent in close to it, is in shadow. Kauffmann was a superb painter of female beauty, and Sappho is depicted as a beautiful woman, but the qualities the painter conveys go beyond the mere outward appearance of beauty. We are left in no doubt that Kauffmann's Sappho, like the painter herself, is an independent and forceful creative agent in her own right, with a beauty far more than skin deep. The classical harmony of her face and expression, and her large liquid eyes, embody the notion of intellect and poetic genius. The blue, white, and red of the drapery both draws the figures together, setting them apart from their darker background, and differentiates them, while respecting the overall balance of colour and form essential to this neoclassical composition. In a diagonal play of harmonies, Cupid's silvery white wings echo Sappho's tunic, while the golden brown of the tablet and scroll she holds balance the luscious golden brown of Cupid's hair. The arrangement of limbs and hands, with each figure echoing the other, Cupid's right arm half embracing Sappho and his right hand pointing across her shoulder towards the scroll, draws the viewer's focus towards Sappho's words, the tools of her genius. So what is written on the scroll? Sappho's work survives only in fragments. The only complete poem or song we have from her is called Fragment 1 and is known as the Hymn to Aphrodite, which is thought to have been created for performance as part of collective female rituals devoted to the goddess of love. While it is a ritual work of religious devotion which needs to be understood in the context of Greek religious practice of the time, it also strikes a highly personal note, which is one of the reasons for its enduring appeal as a poem of love. The poet addresses Aphrodite, goddess of love and her patron deity, and invokes her aid as an ally in the struggles of love and desire. The original Greek makes it clear that the object of Sappho's desire is another woman, although her 18th century English translators changed her beloved into a young man as part of the patriarchy's determined effort to tame Sappho and make her safely heterosexual. The Hymn to Aphrodite, whether distorted or not, was well known in the 18th century, and while Angelica Kauffmann did not know Greek, it was accessible to her in several of the languages in which she was fluent. She was notably multilingual, even for someone from Switzerland, including German, French, Italian, and English. The Greek text itself was easily available, with John Addison's 1735 edition a pioneering effort in this respect. He published the Greek side by side with the English, and Kauffmann would have had no difficulty transcribing it accurately into her painting. The text she chose is from the opening lines of the final stanza of the Hymn to Aphrodite. Here is John Addison's translation of the lines from 1735. The climax of Sappho's appeal to Aphrodite is a suitable text for the poet to be writing, as she is inspired by love in the form of Cupid at her shoulder. Although Kauffmann respects the restraint and decorum which was typical of the neoclassical style, and was also particularly expected of a female painter, her Sappho is passionate, and her passion is articulated above all in her words. Women's words are powerful, Sappho's more than most, and to convey a woman's feelings through her own unmediated words was itself a radical act for a woman painter to undertake. It has been argued that the face of Sappho in Kauffmann's painting is a disguised self-portrait. If it is well disguised, as it looks nothing like her. But, as with Kauffmann's many other depictions of notable women from history, her Sappho is, in a way, a self-portrait. Indeed, the artist Henry Fuseli said of Angelica Kauffmann that her heroines are herself. This kinship is deeper than physical resemblance, reflecting Kauffmann's affinity for women who, like her, aspired to achieve great things in their own chosen spheres. The affinity which Kauffmann felt for Sappho reflected her determination to triumph in the most elevated and demanding genre of art, history painting, already difficult, and to do so as a woman, more difficult still. In celebrating Sappho, Angelica Kauffmann is asserting the existence of a historical tradition of female achievement at the highest level, and laying claim to it, not just for herself, but for all her sex.